Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 826. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about beaches and bioluminescence and boracay, history and hurricanes, rainforest, and rum, as we go to the island of Puerto Rico. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Puerto Rico. I'd like to welcome the show Jessica from diningtraveler.com, who's come to talk to us about Puerto Rico. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
I wanted to do a show on Puerto Rico, and everybody kept asking me when the show was going to come out, because many of the people who follow me on social media know that I was just in Puerto Rico because I thought it would be really good to go down for a hurricane, which wasn't my original plans. But I didn't get out of San Juan, and so there was no way I was going to do a show without someone who knew this country better than me. What's your connection with Puerto Rico?
So I grew up in Puerto Rico in a town called Guayama, which is on the southern coast of the island. Literally, if you get on the highway from San Juan straight south, you end up in my hometown. And I moved to the mainland for high school, but I've always had that link to Puerto Rico with my family, friends. So I travel there often. During my college years, I moved to Puerto Rico for a bit. And it's just my happy place. Like after all these years, it's just that place I love to go back to and my home.
Excellent. And why should someone go to Puerto Rico?
So, one of the things that I love about Puerto Rico, and I think that's something that even Puerto Ricans have in our DNA, is it's so mixed. There's so much versatility there for the size. It's 110 miles long and 35 miles wide. And in that, you have all these microclimates. You have the rainforest in Ajunque, you have a dry forest in Guanica, you have this range of mountains that goes east to west that are just emerald green. It's just such a mix. Like the West Coast is like surfers, East Coast is white sand beaches and nice fancy resorts. So there's just a little bit for everybody. And that reflects also on the people of Puerto Rico. there's just all these little subcultures that exist on such a tiny island, which it makes it so fascinating. And beyond the beaches, because people think initially, oh, I'm going to go to Puerto Rico so I can
Hmm.
go to the beach and have a beach holiday. But beyond the beaches, you have these mountains and you have rivers and waterfalls and lakes. And for somebody who loves nature and loves the outdoors, Puerto Rico is such an amazing destination.
What I would add, as somebody who loves history, you've got a fair amount of it, more
Yes.
than as a colonial city, more than I think every other city but one in the Americas, North and South both.
Yes.
Quite a lot of history there as well for a history buff like me.
And
Excellent. What
especially
kind of itinerary are you going to recommend? Where are we going to start?
even though there's two other airports, most people fly into
Hmm.
San Juan. And in San Juan, I love because it's such a dynamic city. You were just there, so you probably know as well. Great restaurants, but I'm not in love with the beaches. And actually, one of my favorite beaches, Ocean Park, has been really affected by climate change. That an
Mm.
issue. So a lot of it is eroding. So I love renting a car. I always recommend to people rent a car when you get to Puerto Rico. It's not crazier than driving in DC or New York City or anything like that. Even though there's a lot of
It's
traffic,
easier
obviously.
than driving in New York City, I'd say.
Yeah, there's typical rush hour traffic, but
Right.
aside from that, just rent a car and go and explore the island. I use Google Maps when I'm there. It's never led me astray. And
Hmm.
there's some great beaches along the coast. You have probably like 300 beaches to choose from. If you're there just for the beaches,
Hmm.
try to do those like on a weekday, just because on weekends, that's what Puerto Ricans like to do is like,
Right.
hey, the whole family goes to the beach. So if you're looking for more like some quiet time on the beach, definitely recommend the weekdays. And what I love is that every coast kind of has a feel to it, right? So
Okay.
the northern coast is the Atlantic, so the waters are a bit rougher. However,
Hmm.
you have these little, they call them pozos, like these little ponds that are created from the rock formation. So it almost turns into these swimming pools. So there's several of them, like Mar Chiquita in a town called Manatee. There's, which is super interesting because you have like this almost like a swimming pool, and then you have the rocks, and then you have this other beach where people are just surfing. You have these crazy waves, and then you have this very tranquil piece that little kids can swim in. The West Coast is surfing, Rincon, but then you go to the Southwest to Cabo Rojo, which is like the most southern point of Puerto Rico. And those beaches pretty much look like swimming pools, super calm, barely any waves. That's, I have a 6 year old. Last time we were in Puerto Rico this summer, that's where we stayed just because I know that she can swim and do her thing and I'm not freaking out as a mom. And the Southern Coast, to me, it's like it's one of those unhidden or those hidden gems that you have, like these towns that no real like big tourists go to because there's no big resorts, but there's so much history, so much to see. For example, La Parguera, which is very popular with locals, but you don't see that many tourists that are not from outside Puerto Rico, but they have a bioluminescent bay. Unfortunately, because of pollution and everything, it's not as strong as the one, let's say, in Vieques, but it's still kind of a cool
Right.
experience to do. Ponce is a hub. If you keep on going on the southern coast, Ponce is a hub for culture. They have one of the largest museums, which is called the Museum of Art of Ponce. Unfortunately, it's still closed. They're doing this campaign to reopen it, but it's a hub for Puerto Rican culture. And if you keep on going through that southern
Oh,
coast,
oh, hang
I'm
on a
sorry.
second. I'm going to slow you way down.
Sorry, I get all hyped up talking
You're
about
going to
Puerto
do this
Rico.
in 5 minutes, and I'm going to.
We're on a road trip.
Yeah, we're gonna put the hello and goodbye back to back. Let's slow this way down. We backing up a bit. We started in San Juan. You
Yes.
didn't spend any time in San Juan. Is there anything you want to see in San Juan
Yes.
before we leave town?
Yes, absolutely. Juan is,
Okay.
even though it's one of those places that is very touristic, it is
Hmm.
steeped in history. You have El Morro, which is also is a part of the national park system. They do have
Which
guided
is a big
tours.
castle fortress on the end of
Yes,
the
is a
island.
castle
Yep.
fortress that was built by the Spaniards. So Puerto Rico named Rich Port in Spanish. And it got its name also because it was, when you look at it in the map, it's the biggest island and it's between Spain and the New World or the
Hmm.
Americas. So, like when you look at the middle, Puerto Rico. So, it was like a logistics hub of shipping off all the gold that they were bringing from the Americas to Europe.
The one thing I didn't realize, you mentioned it, rich port and things like that. I didn't realize that originally the name of the island was San Juan Batista, San Juan, and the
Hmm.
name of San Juan was Puerto Rico because this was the
Yes.
port city, and that very early on they swapped, and that doesn't happen that often. That was news to me.
And even before the arrival of the Spaniards, it was
Hmm.
called Borican by the indigenous
Hmm.
people, the Taino Indians, and a lot of in Puerto Ricans we call each other Boricua, which comes from Borican, from the original indigenous name. So if we want to go
Right.
really back,
And Discover Puerto Rico is really reclaiming that
the
now
Live
as,
Boricua
yeah, the Live
campaign.
Boricua, and trying to reclaim that culture and basically use that term, not officially for the name of the island, but for the island lifestyle, let's say.
Yes.
Very cool.
And so going back to El Morro, obviously everybody wanted a piece of that. The
Right.
Dutch, the English, so the Spaniards
Hmm.
were like, we need to build this, we need to build this fortress to protect our stuff. So that's how El Morro came about. And what is fascinating is beyond the history is also you get like the most beautiful views of the coastline from El Morro because obviously from
Yes,
a
indeed.
technical perspective, it is a high point. And from those watchtowers, you just get such a magical view because you get the colorful homes, you get the
Hmm.
ocean. That part of the beach is very rough. So it's like these huge waves and rocks. And
Right.
so it's very fascinating to see. So I definitely recommend, even for me after all these years, I never get tired of going to Viejo San Juan, to Old San Juan.
Excellent. Anything else you want to recommend in Old San Juan from there?
And Old San Juan, so I love just wandering around the streets and I
Yep.
love the architecture, the bright color houses,
Hmm.
obviously, and about my favorite part, the eating part, for the more classic, for the
Dining
most,
traveler, you
yes.
invite someone on with that name, you talk
And
about food.
one
Okay.
of the things, again, one of the things that I think it's beloved from visitors and locals is Mallorca, which is a bakery that's been there
Hmm.
forever.
I
And
was
the yeah, and as the name Mallorca, it's not only a town in Spain, but it's a style of a sweet bread called
right.
Mallorca. And they make the most delicious sandwiches. And if I'm in Old San Juan and it's breakfast time, I definitely order a bacon, egg, and cheese on a Mallorca, like and on the plancha, which is
When you say sweet bread, we're talking about a bread that is sweet, and
yes,
then they
it's
put all
not
the stuff in, and then they put the powdered sugar on the
yes, of
top.
course, which is
It's like,
delicious. And I recommend people to leave your diet at home if you go to Puerto Rico. Diet later.
I almost asked them to leave that off. I thought, no, I'm in Puerto Rico. I will have it the way the Puerto Ricans have. But yeah,
And
very tasty, but quite sweet.
yes, it's and you can ask like to withhold the powder from the top, and so that's one of the places that I really like.
Mm.
Obviously, in Puerto Ricans, we love our coffee. There's this awesome coffee shop called Café Cuatro Sombras, and it's right near the port. It's local owned.
And
Really,
that's the one that is farm to cup.
yes, yes.
Hmm.
And they do locally grown beans. There's another place that I like and my daughter loves, and it's this tiny little place called Señor Paleta, and they do popsicles, like Mexican style popsicles,
Okay.
and they
All
do
the port.
yeah, also near the port with these
Hmm.
delicious tropical. Like I love everything that is guava and passion fruit, pina colada, and they do those too, which is really nice.
Excellent. Any other
And
places, well, we're talking about food, any other food places in Old San Juan or in San Juan before we move
And
over?
in San Juan, for food, I love Santurce area. So you're now leaving the old city and more
Oh,
into the district, if you want to call it, in Santurce, which is like a 15-minute drive from Old San Juan without traffic, with traffic 25 maybe. So there's several fine dining places in that area. One that I really love is Orujo. It's a chef called Carlos Portela, tiny restaurant, but he is a chef and sommelier, and he's like a one-man show. He has a few folks helping him out, but he just does this 15-course menu, super interesting, using mostly local ingredients, and it's like a show. It's very fascinating to watch him put all these flavors together. For example, he'll use and a lot of times, sorry if I stall because I'm thinking of it in Spanish and then translating it.
that's all right.
but plantain with like braised
Hmm.
duck, but with Puerto Rican spices, red snapper cured. So very interesting things with ingredients that you find in Puerto Rico. Another place that I love, it's in La Placita de Santurce, which is a popular nightlife destination. Santa Ella is one of those restaurants that I always go back to, again, more on the expensive side. And for more casual for lunch, there's a place called El Patio de Sole. And it's into Sole's backyard. And it's like this cute little courtyard. And these people just make classic rice and beans and fried pork chops, but just very like home cooked meals. But it looks like somebody's courtyard. It's very cute.
Excellent. One I would add to that mix, I've got a whole blog post on my favorite places to eat in Old San Juan, and I won't go through the whole thing, but I will put a link to it in the show notes and also other things to see in Old San Juan because I spent a week there, as I say, just recently. But Cocina Abierta, I'm not sure my
Yeah, cocina
pronunciation there,
abierta.
in Condado thing that they're doing. So I did not know, and I was quite surprised to find out that Puerto Rico imports about 85% of everything that they eat,
Yes. Yes.
which seems so strange on an island which is a very verdant island, as you mentioned. And this is one of the places that's trying to change that. So they're doing a local only menu. And so it was interesting to try what the menu was. And it was a wonderful menu. It's a little high end restaurant there. I was recommended and sponsored, I should say, by the Discover Puerto Rico. I enjoyed it maybe more because they were paying for it, but I think I would have enjoyed it quite a lot anyway.
But and I've been there and I've dined with my own money. It is very good. I'll add that
Thank
in.
you. But they're also doing an interesting thing where if you're a local in the area, there's an app that they're working with called Produce,
Produce.
PROD,
Mhm.
with a pound at the end or exclamation point, and it's basically getting farm to table to locals so that they can order local produce and support the farmers and such. Because I guess one of the problems is when you've got your coffee beans that are coming locally, it's great, but when a hurricane blows through, it can really disrupt some of that. So that's part of what's happened, but also part of it is just economics of things where it can be cheaper to bring in the fish on the big tanker than it is to get it from the local fishermen. So I like that somebody is working to change that and in a delicious fashion. So
And unfortunately, also with the food production, there are several things. Another one that makes also the cost of food in Puerto Rico is very high is one of the things that they're trying to do away with. And it's like the Jones Act and the ley of cabotaje,
right.
which requires anything that goes to Puerto Rico to have to pass through the mainland of the
Right.
United States, which becomes not only a problem for everyday eating, but in a time of crisis, i.e., a hurricane. And I can't believe
Right.
it's 2022 and they still don't do away with such an archaic rule that just makes
Yeah,
things more expensive for an American citizen.
exactly.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, col... C'est million heure. Parfait. C'est million o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Cool. Anything else we want to do in San Juan? I know you want to get us somewhere else.
And in San Juan, I love if you're there, especially on a weekend or you get from the airport, is the area of Piñones and Loíza is a lot of fun, especially
And
if you
a lot
like
of fun being lively nightlife or
lively. More for me, it's more of a daytime vibe.
got it.
There is
Okay.
also a night there too, but it's lively during the day. There's like a lot of places that are making like fried, they call them frituras, so fritters, and it's just
We should say when you're eating in Puerto Rico, you can expect fried, you can expect plantains, you can expect pork. If you can make it and fry it and put some combination of those, like
yes,
fried plantains, all the better. Although
yes,
I have
and
to say, my biggest surprise was I'd had plantains before and love them, but also tried breadfruit for the first time.
yeah,
Fried
that's my
breadfruit
favorite.
which tastes like bread, strangely enough. I wonder why they called it that.
And what time, when did you go? Like you said, September, you were
September, yeah,
there.
exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, August, like from July, August, September is like the season that it's very abundant on the island. So it's a great time to go if you like breadfruit because it's like in a lot of menus.
Although it is, and we should talk about time to go, it is also hurricane season. And in my experience, that isn't necessarily the best time to be there, is when the hurricane is passing through the island. Where I was fine, relatively, it did mean all the restaurants were closed one day that I was there, and I was living off
Yes.
of snacks I had in my backpack, which wasn't ideal.
Yeah,
Not
it's
nearly as bad as the people had it in the southern end part of the island who had real flooding and real problems.
absolutely. And so there's so much to do. You can do like a good weekend in San Juan and have a fantastic time. One of my favorite places to go, and sometimes I just get off the plane and I go straight there, and it's in Ocean Park. There's a bakery called Casalta. It's one of my favorites, and it's this like Spanish style bakery, but you literally have the most delicious sandwiches, but they also serve like rice and beans. Like if you want something a bit heavier for lunch or an early dinner, I think it closes around like 9 p.m. But they also have wines and cocktails there. So if you fancy a cocktail at noon, you can do that too. They have great coffee, great pastries. And it's just like one of those like super casual places. And everybody like converges there. Tourists, people that
Got it.
live in it's an expensive neighborhood. So people that live in the neighborhood, people that work in the neighborhood. So it's just like a mix of everybody. And it's pretty affordable to have a meal there.
Excellent. Are we ready to head to the beach?
Yes, let's go to the beach.
Okay, so you took us right from San Juan and immediately told us you were going to head to a beach. If
Yes.
we're in San Juan and we want to go to a beach, you said not. We're going to skip the ones in San Juan. Where are we going?
So if you don't want to go too far from San Juan, I recommend Quita, which is in Manatí, and it's like around 45 minutes, depending on traffic, to get there. During the week, it's a bit more relaxed. During the weekend, it could be a bit busy, but it's really almost like a horseshoe shaped beach. So it's beautiful. If you look it up, you'll see some great drone shots. And it's encircled by rocks. So around it is like this really rough Atlantic water, but then it's calm, it's nice to swim, and you can actually even snorkel there and see some pretty cool fish. And so I just love the vibe. It's very relaxed.
The name just finally occurred to me. Mar Chiquita, Little Sea.
Little sea, yes.
Okay, because it's a little lagoon. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it now. All right, I'll catch up.
And
Yeah.
I do love those beaches on the northern coast. They're so
Mhm.
different because they're not like the typical Caribbean blue sea. Like I mentioned before, they're more these like products of just geology. The rock formation is breaking. What do you call? I'm losing the word here in English, but
Erosion.
yes, that creates these
This is,
kind of like
we should tell people this is the problem when you do this at the end of a work day.
the end of the workday, you're thinking in a different language. And because, all these things about Puerto Rico, obviously they're in my head, they're in Spanish.
In Spanish first if you want, and I may even be able to help you with the translation.
But as you go, and the great part is that you can either go east or west. And what I mentioned is if you go west, the beaches are more, you have those swimming pools, but you also have these beaches with a lot of waves. If you're
You mentioned Rincon being the
in
surfer
going on the west,
capital.
yes,
Yep.
on the west coast, but
And
even
also
east.
where my daughter and her husband honeymooned and loved it. Yep.
Oh, nice. And Isabela, which is on the north coast, but that's
Mhm.
also still going towards the west side.
Okay.
So those are more geared for surfers, even though you do have those little swimming pools available. One of
Okay.
my favorite beaches, Crash Boat, is on the northwest point of the island in the town of Aguadilla. And I love that they have this pier that's been around forever that you can jump off of and swim. And if you bring your snorkel, you can also see some pretty cool stuff. If you
Okay.
prefer more of that white sand beach and relaxed vibe, then go east of San Juan, go towards Luquillo, Fajardo, Ceiba, and there you'll find more of those like white sand, blue beaches because that's like going into Caribbean territory.
Okay. And by the time we're in Fajardo and Ceiba, we're way at the east coast, the
You're at the
easternmost
east
points of
coast
the.
of the
Okay.
island, and that's where also Ajunque, the rainforest, is at, which
Right.
is lovely. It's to me it's one of my favorite places on earth.
And tell us a little more about. So I see. I always want to say El Yunque. So I see. I am saying that wrong. Also El Yunque, which is a rainforest. So hiking is normally what I picture doing in there. I didn't get there this time because unfortunately don't go when there's a hurricane. But and then I also see pictures of people sliding down waterfalls and into pools and things like that. Is that my experience? Is there a particular place I would go there?
So there's two different things. So
Hmm.
you do have tours like that do like the
Sure.
canyoning tours. I've never done one personally, but there's also I've done that type of tour, but I've done it like on the other side of the island. But going back to Ajunke, the cool part about Ajunke is that it's managed by MPS. You can go into recreation.gov and you look up Ajunke, and it provides you all the trails that are open. Unfortunately, many of the trails were closed because Ajunque got a lot of damage during Hurricane Maria. So, for example, one of my favorite trails, La Mina, which has this stunning, huge waterfall, that's still closed after 5 years. But it does
Okay, interesting.
offer some other trails and it shows you how long they take, the level of difficulty. When I was last in Puerto Rico in July with my family, we did some of the more easier hikes just because my daughter was 5.5 at the time, and we were also with some other families with kids. So we did like Angelito Trail, which is a bit it's at the base of the rainforest. There's also like a stream there. It's very nice. Your kids are not going to complain.
Kids complain? Never.
I know. I'm like, you know what? Hopefully she thanks me like 30 years from now. And so there is a list. And also, even if you just want to take in the views and you're not a hiker or you're injured or whatever, drive. There's a road that you can drive. There's several areas where you can park and there's like a scenic view. So that's what I love about the park is that it's very versatile, whether you're an experienced hiker and you really want to take on those trails or you just want to drive in and check it all out, that's available to you too. But I
Right.
will say that ever since the hurricane and they opened the park again, you do have to sign up and register your vehicle before going. And
Oh, okay.
this changes a lot. When I went there in 2021, it was very easy to get a pass to go in because you could book it like a month in advance. This last time I was there in July, you had to like book 48 hours in advance and you literally had to be at your computer when it opened, I think
Hmm.
at 10 a.m. So I would just,
Okay.
when you're planning your trip to Puerto Rico, take that into consideration if going to Ajunque is a priority for you.
So we may end up doing a tour not because we choose to do a tour, but because that's our only way to see it if we haven't planned far enough in
Yes.
advance.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
good to
tour
know.
providers will obviously have a priority and
Sure.
availability, but if you're more of those, I'm going to rent a car and explore on my own, be advised that to keep your eye out on the booking to get it into the rainforest. Mind you, so there's the main part that is managed by the Forest Service. However,
Right.
there are parts of Ajunque that are not managed by this kind of go at your own risk. They're a bit further out. So there are different trails that you can tackle in the rainforest, but for the main ones that are kept and if you get lost, somebody's going to find you. You're going to need a little bit of extra planning.
Okay. Got it. Anything else we want to do while we're here on the east coast of Puerto Rico?
And if you have a few days to spare, I love Vieques and Culebra. I love the outer
Hmm.
islands. There's
And we
several
actually
ways.
have a whole separate episode of Amateur Traveler on just on Vieques.
Oh, fun.
And again, I have done the bioluminescent bay in Vieques back when
It is.
you could swim. Actually, back
Oh,
before
wow.
they changed it to see through. What I want to say, acrylic
Yeah.
kayaks. Amazing experience.
It truly is. I did it in 2008, and I believe that you could still jump in and swim. But I love paddling and seeing everything just
Hmm.
come to life. There's a ferry from Fajardo, but there's also from Ceiba. There's a airport, and you can. I don't know if they've changed because I didn't. I went to Vieques with my family last year, but we flew from San Juan. But it
Hmm.
used to be like $80 round trip. If you fly from Ceiba, you can leave your car
Hmm.
there. And I think parking is $10 a day, so nothing crazy. But the outer islands, I love both of them. I love Vieques, I love Culebra. And if you have time to even go there for an overnight, it's definitely worth it. And I love obviously the rainforest. Luquillo is like a cute little beach town, and it has the Kioscos de Luquillo, which is this like long stretch filled with kioscos that serving all sorts of food. But what they've done is throughout the years, they've changed it quite a bit. because before it used to be like these very like kind of basic shacks with the fried
Hmm.
food, which are great, but now they have several restaurants, even like a ceviche restaurant. There's a restaurant that I really called Terruño, which is like artisanal Puerto Rican food.
Hmm.
That's very
Okay.
nice, and that's been around now for several years. And I believe you can still make reservations ahead. So there's a little bit of everything for everybody. There's tacos, so for those who want the traditional stuff, it's there. But for those who want ceviche tacos, like you can find that as well. I think it's altogether like 40 different kiosks that you can eat at kiosk restaurants. So the east coast of the island is very lively. And I also love the scenic route that you can take all the way to the south of Puerto Rico, like Route 3, which is really nice because you go past Ceiba and then you end up in Humacao, Nabo, Naguabo. And those are also just very nice, especially if you're renting a car. Unfortunately, Puerto
Hmm.
Rico has really bad public transportation. So the only way you can get to these places is by renting a car because there is some public transportation, but it's even the locals don't take it.
We talk about one of the advantages of Puerto Rico is it's the US. And so it's very easy. It's Spanish speaking US, but it's so familiar. But of course, that's one of the problems in most places in the US is we're a car centric culture. We should not be surprised if Puerto Rico is also.
Yes, very much. And it's sad in San Juan, there's doing better job for
Mhm.
folks to get around by bus and stuff. And there's Uber. But
Right.
unfortunately, if you're trying to get out of the metro area, you definitely have to rent a car to make your experience a bit easier.
Yeah, I would say if you're staying, for instance, as I did in Old San Juan, don't rent your car yet. Get it after
No,
your
no, yes, because parking
that is a
is awful.
walkable portion of the city,
Yes.
both in terms of you want to walk it, you should walk it, and you don't want to worry about a car there.
And
But
every
yeah.
year they change the parking regulations in Old San Juan. It used to be that you can park on the street. Now it's residents only, and now they've even cut a lot of the even residential parking. So folks that live there is even difficult for them to get parking on the
Hmm.
street. So yes, I definitely recommend that if you are going to rent a car, not if you do want to rent a car the whole time, don't stay in Old San Juan. And if you are staying in Old San
Right.
Juan, don't have a
Good
car.
point. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's definitely complicated.
Excellent. Now you moved us. Oh, we're going along Route 3. We're going past some of these beautiful towns. Or anything particular we're stopping in while we're passing by?
So and what I love about Puerto Rico is that on all these like roads, there's always little restaurants and places that you can stop by. Some restaurants that have
Hmm.
a view. So it's just in Puerto Ricans, like we're very spontaneous people. So it's just that spontaneity of driving by and seeing a place that's open is, hey, I'm going to have a beer and something to eat here and catch a view of the beach, which is really nice. And on the weekends, you probably heard about it too, like the whole concept of chinchorreo, that
Okay.
people just get together with their families, they hop on a car and they pick the stretch of restaurants and stuff that they can stop and have a drink. And most of the restaurants are pretty basic, but there's never a shortage of cocktails, beer, and music, as you probably noticed when you were in Puerto Rico.
I did
Um,
notice that. Yes.
Yes. And so you have two options. You can keep on going south to the
Okay.
southern coast of the island, or you can cut and go towards the center. Either way is fine. I love the center of Puerto Rico for many reasons. One is a lot of the culinary traditions come from the countryside called the Camp of Puerto Rico. And there's also a place that's for me, is very special called Bacoa, which is in the town of Juncos and is nestled in the mountains. And these young chefs bought a farm basically, and they have this beautiful restaurant, stunning views. I was there when was it? I think right before the pandemic, I was there with my friends, and we literally were walking to the restaurant and a cow just walked past us. And we had a bit of a staring contest with a cow when we walked into the restaurant. But really beautiful. And what they do is just like a combined refined dishes, but in this like very rustic setting. So definitely worth stopping by. I also love the town of Calle. It's known for the route of the roasted pig. That's what
I
lechon.
remember talking about that in an older episode, and I've
Yeah.
wanted to go to Puerto Rico since then. And it was one of the things I wanted to do that the darn hurricane kept me from
Yes,
doing.
so you'll have to go back because it is. I grew up. I'm from Guayama, so it's 30 minutes
Hmm.
from from Guavate, and once a month my dad would always, we have an aunt that lives near there, so my dad would always take us there and we would have lunch and we would have, and you just see like these full size pork, especially on the weekends, being roasted on Spitfire, and they're cutting them with these huge machetes. It's,
And
but
I'm
when you,
picturing these are small, off the route restaurants that are not fancy. I
no,
might be
these are
sitting on
not
a
fancy.
plastic stool, but I'm eating some of the best pork I've ever had. Is that the
Yes, you're
okay?
eating on some benches, but some of them, even though they're basic in terms of benches or whatever, but on the
Hmm.
weekends, like they'll have a dance floor, they have band playing,
The
and
basics in Puerto Rico would include dancing, I would assume.
yes, everybody, yes, it's
At least music.
there's definitely music and people dancing. And I just love asking, you order the pork and they'll ask you what part do you want. And this guy with this machete will cut it into little pieces for you. And then you'll have all sorts of sides. You'll have like rice and beans. And even if you don't eat pork or if you don't eat meat,
Hmm.
there's a lot of root vegetables that are very hearty and filling. So you can have like rice with pumpkin and sweet potato, and so even if most people think, oh, it's meat, but I think that lately there's been a big effort also to accommodate vegetarian palates as well.
Okay.
But I love that area of Guavate, and I
But the
always
root of the
recommend.
roasted yam doesn't have the same.
No. But if you want to go, if you want to be supportive to your vegetarian friend, hook them up with some yam and you can have your lechon.
There we go.
And everybody can agree on pina coladas, right?
There you go.
And so that's one area that I like a lot. And obviously, if you go south, like I mentioned, Ponce is a very nice city. I believe it's the second largest city in Puerto Rico. And it's,
Named after the old explorer and first
yeah,
governor of Puerto Rico, Ponce
yeah,
de
Juan Ponce
Leon.
de Leon. And unfortunately, like Ponce's kind of a bit of a beating with Hurricane Maria. Then they had the
Right.
earthquakes, which there was like this really beautiful area that is being currently refurbished. It's called La Guancha. And it was like a
Okay.
boardwalk and really pretty. You can go paddle boarding there. They have like boat rides. They had a lot of restaurants and stuff. So from what I hear, they're currently rebuilding it. And like I mentioned, the Museum of Art of Ponce, which I think it should be reopening in the next year or so. But aside from that, it has a very cute, they call them in Puerto Rico, like the town square, Plaza de Recreo. So they
Okay.
have a very nice plaza, and it has this iconic red and white old school fire station that's really pretty. That was actually used for the
Right.
World's Fair way back. I forgot, it was like in the either in the late 1800s or in the early 1900s. But it's just like
Hmm.
if you love that style, that colonial style architecture, it's definitely a place to check out. And obviously not as crowded as San Juan. So if you want like that authentic experience, I definitely recommend going to Ponce.
And you say as crowded as San Juan. So there's San Juan proper, which is crowded, and then there's Old San Juan, which in normal seasons, when you're not there during a hurricane, has lots and lots of cruise ships and doubles or
Mhm.
triples the number of
Yes.
people there. So if you're outside of the Old San Juan, I think it's big city crowded, but more not that crowded.
No, it's not that crowded, obviously. And I forgot the cruise days. I think they used to be Sundays and Thursdays. I don't know if
Okay.
they changed, but it's like
Uh,
the kind of the day like that people that live there, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to San Juan on a Sun or like on a Sunday
sure.
night, like when the cruises are coming. But and then the rest of San Juan is just normal traffic, I would say.
Okay.
Obviously, during high season from
And a
end
high
of
season
January.
would be winter.
High season would be winter. So it starts, you probably know Puerto Rico has the longest Christmas season in the world. It's because
No.
yes, I have friends already posting on Facebook that they're putting their Christmas tree up, which is even for me as a Puerto Rican, I'm like that's wild. But it's in line with the US holidays. So a lot of people start that Christmas season that week of Thanksgiving, and it extends all the way to middle January. Obviously, there's a very big Puerto Rican diaspora. I think there's 6 million Puerto Ricans that live outside of Puerto Rico. So a lot of them
Hmm.
come during that season. So it's
Hmm.
already hard to find hotels, especially at an affordable price when so like late November, December, and that extends all the way to April. Granted, you have
Hmm.
fabulous weather, especially when it's snowing in New York and in the
Right.
Northeast. You
Especially
can
by
go,
comparison. Yep.
so you might just say whatever, I'll pay double to have the sunshine, but and also you'll have some great weather contrary to hurricane season, which for me, like my favorite time to travel to Puerto Rico is in November, right
Okay.
before the holiday rush, because
Hmm.
now the hurricane season is dying down. It's the beginning of the high season, so you still get some pretty decent prices for lodging. It's not as crowded, so that's my favorite time to go. I
Okay.
used to like to go in the summertime, but I feel that, I don't know, the last 2 summers I've been to Puerto Rico has also been very crowded. Good for Puerto Rico getting that tourist economy, but I feel like it's been crowded all year for the past few years.
I cannot tell you. I've only been there a couple times, so
Yeah.
I rely on your knowledge here.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to see in Ponce?
So in Ponce, there's, like I mentioned, the city center.
Yep.
There's also, I haven't been to personally, but it's been on my list forever. You can take these boat rides to an island called Caja de Muerto, which means coffin. Because it's like a long rectangular, like in shape of a coffin, but apparently it's a beautiful beach. Now you're in the Caribbean side, and it's definitely a fun outing. And then outside of Ponce, if you keep on going west, that's where you'll run into La Parguera, which is the area, the other bioluminescent bay that
Oh,
Puerto Rico has, but also like very lively on the weekends, live music. It's even if I found it a bit disappointing the few times I've been to see the bio bay part, but just for
okay.
the liveliness, if you want to just have fun, listen to music,
Disappointing because you've been to Vieques and it's not
because I've
quite
been to
as
Vegas.
spectacular as that,
It's
is what
not
you're
as
saying.
quite as
So
spectacular.
if
Yeah.
you're going to see them both, see them in the
Go to
order of
Vegas.
Vieques second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. But, and then you have the dry forest of Guanica, which is super fascinating because you go from these like lush green, like it's wet, it's
Hmm.
green, and all these like coquillas, everything is going on. And then you go to the dry forest of Guanica, and you see is lots of cacti, dry, lots of sand. So it's super interesting that you can drive 90 minutes and you're in a completely different ecosystem. But with
Hmm.
that, also very nice beaches. They're again that Caribbean blue, very calm, not very wavy. So it's definitely worth. There's one beach called Playa Santa that is actually very nice, especially for families to go. But again, on the weekends, get there early to reserve your spot or go on a weekday.
Okay.
And then if you keep on going west, you'll end up in Cabo Rojo, which for me is one of my favorite towns in Puerto Rico in terms of the beaches because you have several. You have Combate Beach, which is to me one of my all-time favorite beach. If somebody had asked me what's your favorite beach in Puerto Rico, I would say Combate Beach. And but there's several others. Buye, there's Playa Sucia, which is called Dirty Beach, but it's not dirty. So I don't know who came up with that name. You have the salt flats of Cabo Rojo, which are these pink salt flats. So it's a decent sized municipality. Unfortunately, they did get a lot of flooding from this last hurricane. However, from what I hear from folks living in the area is that things are slowly going back to normal, and a lot of the hotels have reopened in that area.
Cool.
These are violent criminals, so they're not going to go down easy.
ABC Tuesdays.
Let's get this done.
The Rookie is back.
We have two new rookies starting today.
Howdy.
Being a cop is stressful 24/7. Every year on the job is different.
And Training Day
We have a serial killer at large.
never ends.
We need an ambulance!
The Rookie. All new Tuesdays on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you're a place that people are talking about in the news. And I was in Old San Juan watching the news on the TV, hearing that the power was out all over the island. And granted, the hotel had gone to a generator, as did much of Old San Juan.
Yes.
And obviously we were not where the storm really hit, but it is one of those interesting things where, when you see what's on the news, they're showing you what's newsworthy and
Yeah.
not necessarily, they're not trying to give you a false impression, but on the other hand,
Yes.
it can be misleading.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit challenging too. I think that obviously with Hurricane Maria 5 years ago, a lot of folks who could afford it obviously got generators. A lot of hotels, obviously,
Right,
most
exactly,
hotels will
exactly.
have generators. I have several friends that have gone to solar energy, so they didn't experience a lapse in service. But so obviously, yeah, when you're traveling, you have different commodities, and especially if you're staying at a hotel than people that don't have the resources to have that, which is sad. And especially also water service was something that was affected as well throughout the island. Even some of the folks in the metro area that I spoke to.
And there were people in San Juan who were without power for even in that part of the island,
Yeah,
which wasn't hit, but they get a lot of their power from the southern part of the island. So they were without power.
yeah,
Yes. So we're about to make our way all around the island now. We've done
yes,
our way back to Rincon, where we were surfing earlier.
yes.
And I want to start to get to some of our wrap up questions here. But before we do, what have you left out? There's the real key thing. If you're in Puerto Rico, the one thing you have to know is what?
Wow, that's a tough question in terms of in what context.
Intentionally vague question.
Yeah, because I think the thing you have to know is that in terms of the people, Puerto Ricans just love to talk. So if you get some random person just giving you conversation, don't freak out. Like people just love telling you their life story upon meeting you. That happens a lot. My husband is from the Netherlands and he's, oh, wow. Like I was just talking to this guy and he lived in Brooklyn for 20 years, told me his whole life stories. Don't be surprised. Puerto Ricans are just very open people and just roll with it. And also rolling with it is obviously that some things don't work out perfectly. And that's also, as you were there during a hurricane, you just roll with it. I think that's the best way to go into the island, just like with an open mind and just being willing to roll with how things come along.
Now, I've got some fixed in my mind assumptions in terms of Puerto Rico. Before I went, I knew I had to try mofongo. I knew I had to try a pina colada. Are there things that you would give as alternatives to those are fine, but what you really ought to eat is, or you really ought to drink is?
So you mentioned breadfruit. I love,
Yep.
we call it ban. I love breadfruit. I love it. I love tostones, like made from plantains, but I do.
And so tostones are just fried plantains. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not complicated.
Yeah. But they also have tostones de pana, which are fried pieces of breadfruit that are also
Right.
smashed, double fried. And if those are on the menu, I always prefer those over I find it a milder flavor. I love regular tostones, but there's something about the breadfruit. It's a milder flavor. I think it goes better with a lot of like those very seasoned sauces that you have in Puerto Rico. Don't rule out the bakeries. I just, like I mentioned before, I love having those sandwiches. Even if I'm in a small town, I always go to the town. And it's easy. Like you can find it on Google Maps, bakery, panaderia, boom. Right. But I love...
it's also very easy to order in a bakery, even if you don't speak Spanish. You
exactly.
Can point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I love, and they call it sandwich, sandwich. But I love this sandwich called medianoche, more for lunch, but for breakfast, they have the bread called pan sobao that is like on the sweeter side. And it's just like regular ham, like American cheese, egg, and it's cooked on the grill with plancha at like panini style, but without the grill part, like grilled flat. And I just love that melted cheese coming together with the egg. It's now I'm getting hungry.
Count me in. Okay.
It's almost midnight here in Belgium, and I'm like, oh, now I'm really craving a jamón queso huevo.
And that's going to be harder.
I know.
Anything else that people need to know before they go to Puerto Rico, before I get to my final questions?
And then for drinking, obviously, Puerto Rico, rum capital of the world.
Sorry, I left that out. Yep.
Yeah, people there, they love Don Q is like the rum that everybody drinks there. And I love, especially if you don't like heavy drinks like pina colada, like I'll have one and that's like my pina colada quota. But I love having it with fresh, either grapefruit juice, and that's very light and refreshing, or passion fruit juice. And that's most bars will have that. So very light, very refreshing if you're not into that heavy pina colada taste.
Good to know. Excellent. As we start to wrap this up, you are standing in the prettiest spot in Puerto Rico. Where are you standing at, and what are you looking at?
Oh my goodness. I would say at Mount Britain at El Yunque. It's like one of the highest points of El Yunque. Okay. And on a clear day, you see the whole west coast of the island, and you might even see Vieques and Culebra. So it is a very magnificent point to be standing on.
Excellent. When you're homesick for Puerto Rico, besides your family's home, what's the one place you're thinking of?
When I am homesick, I've been spending a lot of time in Cabo Rojo. So it's one of those places because now I take my own family there. And so whenever I'm like feeling homesick for Puerto Rico, it always brings back those new family memories.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Puerto Rico.
Well, what I just mentioned, people just coming up to you and telling you their life story upon meeting you, which I went for a run. Last time I was in Puerto Rico, I went for a run by myself in Cabo Rojo, and my husband and daughter stayed back by the beach. And it was super hot, and I just started walking, and I run into this guy, and we just started talking, and he was just telling me this whole story, like he was 6 years old and he was in the Air Force back in the day. And it was like he was like the youngest of five brothers and sisters. This all happened like within 10 minutes. And I walked back and my husband's, oh, what happened? And I was like, yeah, I just ran into this guy and he told me like his whole life story. I love that openness of the Puerto Rican people, and I thought it was like, oh, maybe it's me because I'm Puerto Rican, but my husband, who's like the 6'9" Dutch guy, he's like I was paying for the rental car and this dude and I just struck up this conversation. So it's that openness to talk that I really love and I miss, especially living here, like living in Europe now, that I miss of Puerto Rico.
Excellent. Also, the easiest island for converting your U.S. dollars in the Caribbean.
Which is so funny
because you don't.
Because people always ask me, so what is the currency? I'm like,
That's right.
it's a U.S. territory. And if you buy too many things, there's a post office. You can mail your stuff back home and not
That's
have
right.
to worry.
A whole lot easier to clear customs when you're flying from the U.S. and you don't have to.
Exactly.
So, exactly. And if you had to summarize the beautiful island of Puerto Rico, in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
That's a tough one. Delicious.
Yep.
Green, because you see green everywhere.
Incredibly green. Yep.
Yes. Delicious, green, lively.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. That makes perfect sense to me. Good choice. Excellent. Our guest again has been Jessica from diningtraveler.com. And Jessica, if we wanted to send people to your website, to your best post on Puerto Rico, where are we going to send them?
So just hit the search.
And does it involve food?
So I have 2 things. So during the pandemic, because we couldn't travel, I actually made a lot of my family's recipes of Puerto Rican food. So if you've been to Puerto Rico and you really long for Puerto Rican food, I have a whole collection of recipes that I made and with videos, how to. And if you do the search Puerto Rico on the website, there's also a list of my favorite beaches. There's a list of local owned hotels. There's interviews with people that live in Puerto Rico. So there's a little bit of everything on the.
And with the recipes, you have a child who's 5 years old, as I recall.
Yeah, she's going to be 6 in November. And Friday.
Her favorite recipe from that list.
She loves tostones. She can eat like a whole plantain. Like she like even in Brussels we have a pretty big African population. She sees them at the market and she's you need to buy some plátanos and make them for me. So.
Excellent. Jessica, thank you so much. I have a new love for Puerto Rico myself, but I really wanted someone like you to come on who could even say the name of the island correctly. I fell in love with it every time I heard you say it. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your love for Puerto Rico.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I always love going on these long tangents about Puerto Rico. So this doesn't feel like work for me. I truly appreciate it.
Excellent. And then again, I will put links in the show notes for the blog post that I have from my latest trip that you can check those out too.
Awesome.
I'd like to thank the patrons of the show who help make Amateur Traveler possible and support the show financially. If you've had a great trip, like I heard from Jeff Ulfs recently, who said he went to some place when he was down in the Big Bend region that he didn't know about and wouldn't have known about if he hadn't heard it on the show. Always great to hear that, Jeff. If Amateur Traveler has helped you when you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler and learn what you will get for being a patron of the show. I'm recording the show, or at least finishing this show up with my mobile rig as I'm in Phuket, Thailand at the TBEX Asia 2022 event. It's been fun to meet my other fellow travel bloggers and podcasters again. We always have a great time when we get together, and I always learn new things from people who've been doing this, even someone who's been doing it a lot shorter time than me, but are just really smart. So I always appreciate that. And it was fun to talk to fellow podcasters Sharon Gourlay and also to Palebo, and both of them said that they've used Amateur Traveler to help plan their trips. Before they go someplace, they listen to Amateur Traveler episodes, and that is always heartwarming. Because I'm traveling, the show that comes out after Thanksgiving will be a best of show. So I hope you'll enjoy hearing that one again. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.